Hello, I'm Daniel Shore. Only one American president in history was forced out of office, and when he died 20 years later, it was without a state funeral in the nation's capital. I'm talking, of course, about Richard M. Nixon. 2 years and 2 months before he resigned to escape impeachment, his undoing began here in the building called the Watergate. Watergate gave its name to a turbulent chapter in American history.
Watergate, the worst political scandal in American history, finally destroys President Richard Nixon. The president who opened new doors to Russia and China quits the White House in disgrace. He resigned rather than face impeachment for ordering illegal acts.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
2 years before he resigned, the president's re-election committee had broken into his opponent's headquarters in search of damaging intelligence.
There was pressure from the White House, from me, and from the president to the committee to get their campaign intelligence activity going.
The break-in team was caught, and the White House launched the cover-up that ruined Nixon.
The staff itself was not doing very much as a matter of individual initiative. They were carrying out Richard Nixon's instructions day to day.
Now, Nixon's closest advisors give evidence that the Watergate break-in was just one in a series of crimes instigated by the president himself. In May 1970, America was in turmoil. Nixon had won the election on a pledge to end the war in Vietnam. Instead, he escalated it. Thousands of demonstrators laid siege to the White House.
At 4:30 in the morning, I found myself in the Secret Service command post in the old executive office building. And then, just out of the blue, out of a loudspeaker, comes the message sort of crackling through that Searchlight is on the lawn. Well, that just hit me as hard as it can hit you, because that tells you the president is outside the mansion, he's out on the lawn, and it's 4:30 in the morning. He doesn't belong out there.
It was not a good time to have a president on the loose. Earlier that week at Kent State University, 4 students had been shot dead by the National Guard. Nixon feared that a war the Democrats had gotten the country into would cost him his re-election.
And there was just an eruption of fury around the country, a lot of young people descending on Washington. So we had to move quickly to try to figure out, how do we protect the White House? How do we protect the city? The idea was raised, well, maybe we should just, like they did in the Old West, circle the covered wagons and protect it that way.
Behind the barricade of buses, the president tried to defuse the situation before the big protest. He called a press conference in time to reach the students driving to Washington.
Would you be seated?
Until now, Nixon had treated the anti-war protesters as traitors. Now, he changed his tune.
What do you think the students are trying to say in this demonstration?
They're trying to say that they want to stop the killing. They're trying to say that they want to end the draft. They're trying to say that we ought to get out of Vietnam. I agree with everything that they're trying to accomplish.
After his press conference, the president was restless, wondering about how his new line had gone across. At 4 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep And it was then that the White House aide on duty heard that Searchlight was on the lawn.
I immediately put a call through to John Ehrlichman and said, the president is outside, not sure what's going on.
Bud Krogh called me in the middle of the night, woke me up to say that the president was moving and that he appeared to be intent on going out to the mall to hobnob with the protesters, the students, and the others who were gathered there. And what should he do?
He said, go over and render assistance immediately.
The president made for the Lincoln Memorial. There, at the foot of the steps, Bud Krogh caught up with him.
The president was directly engaged in conversation with a number of young people who were wearing combat clothes, peace symbols, long hair.
He just kept rambling, and he'd go from city to city, and then he'd stop on a city, and if he thought of a sport in that city, he'd start talking about it. You know, like he got to California, and he thought of surfing, so then that stopped him, and he'd look up and say, are there any surfers? And then he'd start talking about surfing.
Krogh nervously maneuvered the president back into the car, but Nixon insisted on continuing his tour.
Just about that time, I guess you could say the cavalry arrived. We had the top White House staff. I was very relieved to see them.
I was concerned that we know exactly what the president had said and what the kids had said, so that we had some basis for admitting or denying what took place.
The president said, now let's all walk back to the White House. And I had to explain to him that he couldn't walk back to the White House. The White House was barricaded by buses, and we wouldn't be able to get in, even though he had a pretty good ID card.
The president's gesture of conciliation failed. Nixon now struck back at the anti-war movement. He demanded to know who was behind the protesters, who was funding them. He called a rare summit meeting of his intelligence chiefs.
He ordered the heads of each of the government intelligence agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. There was a group of, I think, 6 or 8 men gathered in the Oval Office. I was there. And the president, he really took the bark off. He laid it out to them that he was fed up with the bickering between the intelligence groups and between the directors themselves.
The net of this was that President Nixon wanted very much to get more information, and if he could just lay his hands on some foreign element that was supporting this activism, then he would have a good political axe with which to wage his own domestic war.
The president issued a secret executive order. It gave the intelligence agencies a free hand to tap telephones, open mail, and break into private homes and offices, overriding legal safeguards and citizens' rights. These new powers to spy on Americans at home were in fact outside the law.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. If, for example, the president approves something because of a threat to internal peace and order of significant magnitude, then the president's decision in that instance is one that enables those who carry it out to carry it out without violating a law.
FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover balked at this doctrine of the divine right of presidents. So Nixon decided the White House would have to do its own dirty work. To recruit their first undercover operative, he had dispatched John Ehrlichman to New York.
He arrived at LaGuardia on a Washington plane with an entourage of assistants. Typical, you know, everybody had attaché cases, leather cases, newspapers, bulky papers under their arms, and I stood by waiting, and finally Mr. Ehrlichman, very officious, made it known he wished to interview with me in connection with taking an assignment with the President of the United States.
So for political things, for personal things, things that were non-governmental, we used Lasowitz, and we paid him.
Mr. Ehrlichman said that should it be disclosed or should it come out, leak out or whatever, that I was on working for the White House, it would be denied.
His first job was to try to dig up new dirt on Chappaquiddick, the controversial drowning incident that had destroyed Senator Edward Kennedy's presidential chances. Ulosowicz traveled the country in search of damaging information on the Kennedys and Nixon's other enemies.
Who gave me my assignments, they came from anywhere around the throne, whether it was from Nixon himself, whether it was Haldeman or Ehrlichman, and it really didn't matter to me. I didn't care if Jehoshaphat was in charge. I did the job as I was asked to do.
On June 12, 1971, Nixon's elder daughter, Tricia, married law student Edward Cox. The president described it as his happiest day in the White House, but the happiness was short-lived.
This presentation of Watergate is sponsored in part by American Airlines, Merrill Lynch, and Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique.
Hey, early again, huh, Frank?
I don't say this to many people. But what we do, the job we do,
Okay, guys, listen up.
is the most important job I can think of.
You've got a flight control check. Lewis and Randolph.
I mean,
Horoscope
there's
on
no
number
such
2?
thing as a B-plus mechanic on this airline.
Let's do it. Let's go.
Everybody knows their job. Everybody's responsible. Anybody, right down to the most junior mechanic, can keep an airplane in this hangar if there's the slightest hint of a problem. You might think, doing a job like this, day in, day out, it'd become routine. You know, just turning wrenches. But every now and then, I just go up and take a walk through the terminal. And right there, right in front of you, you see what's important.
Retirement years should be secure years. That's why Merrill Lynch has a gerontologist to help us understand the social, emotional, and financial needs these years bring. That extra insight can make a difference between seeking security and finding it. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
Here's an inside look at Ford Motor Company's latest achievement. Our worldwide team has created a car for the world, with safety features years ahead of today's safety standards, a computerized transmission that adjusts to any driving condition, and a Duratec V6 engine that can go 100,000 miles without a tune-up. World-class features in a more affordable class of car, and soon you can drive one yourself. Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique, coming September.
Hi, I'm Jed Longhurst with MCI, and because I joined Friends and Family too, I can show you how easily it works for me. I save 20% on calls to anyone I choose, no matter which long-distance company they're with. For example, Jack, my brother-in-law, he's still with AT&T. But watch closely because Jack may switch to MCI's Friends and Family too. He'll do it if he's smart, which he's not. But if he does, I'll save 40% when I call him, and even though he doesn't deserve it, he'll save 40% when he calls me.
At the Discovery Channel, we go to extraordinary lengths to tell extraordinary stories. So if we see it, you see it. The Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
The future. Are you dreaming? Is it real? Japan Dreaming. Monday at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific on Discovery Showcase.
Through every stage of life, your United Way gift makes a difference in our community. It gives a child like Casey a chance to grow healthy and strong. It helps a teenager like Myron get an education and a future. It offers someone like Mary love and comfort in her later years. From all of us at Comcast, thank you for supporting our United Way.
Thank you!
Be the difference. See the difference. United Way.
I would really like a luxury car, but I can't get past the guilt. I mean, look at this one. It's like owning your own plane. And that sound system. The seat is so comfortable. You get dual airbags, a big fuel-injected V8, the Ford Thunderbird LX. Whoa, that's half of what I thought it was going to be. So I really don't have anything to feel guilty about, right? Hello? Oh, Mom, hi. I was just going to call you, really.
The next day, coverage of the wedding was upstaged in the nation's leading newspaper. The New York Times led with the Pentagon Papers, a massive leak of top-secret documents tracing 3 decades of growing American involvement in Vietnam.
2.5 million tons of bombs ago. In October 1969, my friend Tony Russo and I began copying the Pentagon Papers to give them to the American Congress and share them with the American public. The American public didn't get them then. It took 2 invasions later before the newspapers began releasing them. They got them now. They've got them now.
As the Pentagon Papers became a bestseller, Nixon heard that Ellsberg had gotten his hands on yet more secret documents, and that they were now in the possession of a Washington think tank, the Brookings Institution.
I was in the president's office one night, and the president turned to me and he said, "You get a hold of John Ehrlichman and you tell him to get a hold of the Pentagon, to get a hold of the FBI, do whatever is necessary. I want those documents back from Brookings."
The president's private eye was told to case the joint.
They bring me in for this thing with this Brookings Institute. And I went in as a tourist, and I reported by phone, no written report, that it was certainly a great-looking establishment, all marble halls, well guarded.
To get past the guards, Colson proposed to Ehrlichman an unorthodox approach.
He came up with this idea to start a fire. And in the confusion of fighting the fire, somebody would go in and lift these papers.
I said, "I don't care how you do it, the president wants the papers back." That's all I know.
Word of Colson's scheme reached the president's young counsel, John Dean. 2 years later, Dean would bring down the Nixon administration by exposing its conspiracies, including the one that was now brought to him.
He said, "Chuck Colson has got a scheme that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. He wants me to firebomb the Brookings Institute." I said, "What are you talking about?" So I immediately went in to see Ehrlichman, told him of the absurdity of this plan and scheme, and found a very unruffled John Ehrlichman who sort of looked up over his glasses at me and raised his eyebrows, and he said, "Well, maybe we should call it off."
10 days later, the New York Times published another damaging leak. The story gave away the U.S. fallback position in nuclear missile negotiations with the Soviets. The president summoned Ehrlichman and his protege, Bud Krogh.
When I walked in, the president was standing up behind his desk. Then he started to pace back and forth, and he told me that this kind of leak was intolerable, that we just could not stand any more of them. I remember him slamming his fist into his hand, saying how dangerous this was and it had to be stopped.
He wanted lie detector tests given to everybody. He wanted the name of the guy who was responsible. He wanted telephone taps. He wanted, this and that and this and that. A lot of hyperbole, a lot of hubris in the Oval Office.
The president's demand for lie detector tests on a massive scale was recorded, like everything said in the Oval Office, by the hidden taping system he had just installed. Nixon's first target was his foreign policy staff.
I don't know anything about politics, and I don't know how to answer it yet, but I know they'll scare the hell out of it.
Put fear into these people was how Ehrlichman noted the president's instruction. But the FBI dragged its feet and never identified the leakers for Nixon. Nixon, once again blocked by FBI Director Hoover, enlarged his private police force. Instead of a few ex-cops, he now set up a full-time unit inside the White House. Its first task was to deal with Ellsberg.
The problem was, since we can't put the guy behind bars for what he did, or nobody thinks that the chances are very good, what else can be done to at least destroy his image?
Hunt proposed to Coulson a plan to neutralize Ellsberg. Ellsberg had been in psychoanalysis, and Hunt thought his analysis notes could be used to smear him. So he suggested they obtain his psychiatrist's files.
The way we would have met that challenge back when I was in the FBI was we would have pulled what is called a black bag job, a surreptitious entry, a covert operation, and simply taken the records. And Hunt said, well, that's a good idea.
Gordon Liddy did a partnership act with Howard Hunt that President Nixon would come to regret. When they set up office in the White House, though, they came with high recommendations and were sent on their way with even higher introductions.
I called General Cushman, who was deputy director of the CIA at the time, and asked him to extend courtesies to Hunt.
I was told by the White House, Mr. Ehrlichman, that a Mr. Howard Hunt had been hired on as a consultant to the White House, and that he'd be coming to see me, and it'd be appreciated if I could give him a hand. And he needed some papers and disguise to establish an alias.
In order to alter my appearance, I was provided with a pair of German-manufactured glasses. You'll see that they appear to have Coke bottom lenses, and would give any viewer of someone wearing these the idea that I was just this side of total blindness.
Liddy flew to California with Howard Hunt to check out Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. The CIA provided them with further disguises, made-to-measure wigs, a device to alter Liddy's walk, and another to distort Hunt's speech.
So there we were, walking about in Los Angeles, in the heat, sweating under these very well-fitting wigs, I stumbling along like a cripple, Howard Hunt babbling along like this, all courtesy of the Central Intelligence Agency.
They reported to the White House that they could break into the office and the psychiatrist would never know it. Their boss, Bud Krogh, passed the recommendation up to John Ehrlichman, seeking approval for a covert operation to examine all the psychiatric files still held by Ellsberg's analyst.
I recall seeing it come back. We had approve, disapprove. There was an E for Ehrlichman by approve, and underneath that he had written in his own handwriting, if done under your assurance that it will not be traceable. And that was our written authority to go out and conduct that covert operation.
Not traceable meant that others would have to do the actual break-in. Howard Hunt knew where to recruit others.
I come home one day from a day at the office and working, and I find a note up on my, in the glass up on the door, and I picked it up and looked at it and said, if you are the same Barker I once knew, meet me in such and such a place, Eduardo.
It was the 10th anniversary of the Bay of Pigs invasion, the CIA's attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro using Cuban exiles. In Miami, a group of veterans were sought out by their former CIA commander, Howard Hunt, codename Eduardo.
He says, we have this organization at the White House level, and the CIA and the FBI respond to this organization, which is a national security team. And this is when he said they call us the plumbers, because we are there to stop the leaks at the White House.
The operation Ehrlichman had authorized was ready to go. But did the president know what his White House plumbers were doing in Los Angeles?
The question is whether Ehrlichman informed me that these two men were going to California. He may well have. And if he had, I would have said, go right ahead.
What we were engaged upon was something that had the full and hearty support of the executive branch of the United States government. You can do no wrong.
It was the biggest project of its kind. Ford Motor Company creating a car for the world with a Duratec V6 engine that can go 100,000 miles without a tune-up, all-speed traction control, and safety systems designed to meet 1998 standards. Our best designers and engineers from around the world have created world-class features in a more affordable class of car. The Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique, launching September.
Think that focus on the customer as the most important person is absolutely essential.
You don't buy what you want, you buy what the customer wants. That's important.
These are long-term relationships, they are friendships, and you've got to give time to these people.
I guess the most important thing you have to teach a lot of people is about people, be it your fellow worker or your customer.
You're only as good as your last happy customer walking out of the store. Seeing a sign on the store window saying they welcome American Express certainly makes you feel comfortable about going in and not worrying whether you have the money in your wallet.
I call it security because everything works with a car.
There is no option, there's no debate.
I've really been very appreciative of not just the card itself, but the service behind the card.
We expect that kind of service from American Express.
American Express is welcomed wherever they appreciate customers. That's a lot of places.
Choices! You gotta make choices.
Hey, kid, you wanna fly? You gotta buy.
No!
Exercise the right choice.
Visit your local park and recreation department today.
Tonight, find out what it's really like to be behind bars.
This is not scared straight. This is what you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life.
Choice is yours.
Choices. Then relive one day, one typical 24-hour period in our country, where 61 people will be shot. A day in the death of America. Tonight, beginning at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific, on Discovery Sunday. Thursday nights, nuts and bolts, tools of the trade, machines and magicians, on the Discovery Channel. First, how do they do it? Step behind the camera and into the special effects world of movie magic. Then, they seem ordinary, but do we really understand what makes them tick? Look inside the secret life of machines. Thursday at 10 Mountain, 9 Central on the Discovery Channel.
Now, the men who were to be key figures in Watergate undertook their first illegal operation for the president. They planned to get into the psychiatrist's office through a door they had unlocked. But to their surprise, somebody had locked it again.
I said, look, behind these bushes is a window. Now, the window did have steel bars on it. I said, you know, just wrench those off with this equipment we had. They were very powerful men anyway, and they did.
We were looking all and searching all over, and we could not find anything with the name of Ellsberg. And we took a photograph of some cabinets that we broke in, just as a proof that we were there and we were doing our job. That was all.
Back in Washington, Krogh saw the photographs and realized that the Ellsberg operation was more than he'd bargained for.
They had gone in and basically trashed the office, that rather than it being a covert operation, something that would not be traceable, it looked to me as if this had been a major mistake.
It mainlined right back to the president. Usually, when something goes wrong out in a department or an agency, they assume responsibility and the White House stands away from it. When you have White House people involved, you can't do that.
The problem here is we didn't have close enough control. And as I would say, I hope that never in the future does the president have to have another so-called private police force of 4 doing so much work in a number of very important areas, and most of which was justified.
Despite the fiasco, no one got fired. Indeed, Gordon Liddy, seen here with Nixon, was promoted to an even more sensitive post. The Ellsberg affair became one of the president's darkest secrets as he prepared for the election year. As the campaign began, the Democrats threw themselves into the primaries. Ed Muskie fought it out with his main rival, George McGovern, in the contest for the Democratic nomination. Nixon upstaged the primaries. He pulled off the greatest foreign policy coup of his presidency and wiped his Democratic rivals off the television screens. His visit to Beijing, the first by an American president, cracked the ice of the Cold War.
Nixon always talked about this being a historic first, this being the most of this, the best of that. And the election was just one more case where we wanted a coronation. We wanted the power that went with the biggest landslide in history.
Back home, Nixon took the gloves off. He told his chief of staff to do whatever was necessary to get the dirt on his opponents. They called it political intelligence. He assigned his best men to work on it.
I have a copy of a memo, which was one of dozens of such memos sent to me, and there's an item in here that says the Attorney General discussed with John Dean the need to develop a political intelligence capability. John Dean did, in fact, move himself pretty much into the whole area of political intelligence.
We have a responsibility to the citizens of
The president's ambitious young counsel, John Dean, now helped to arrange the most improbable appointment of the Nixon presidency.
John Dean said, the best way I could serve the president in 1972, the campaign year, would be to be the political intelligence chieftain. That what he wanted was a full political intelligence plan.
Liddy moved across Pennsylvania Avenue to the president's re-election headquarters. His new boss, Jeb Magruder, wasn't prepared for the phenomenon that the White House had sent him.
I have lots to talk about with people over the White House.
Liddy was in the office, and I said something as an aside that wouldn't it be good if we could get rid of Jack Anderson?
Jack Anderson's syndicated column was a thorn in the side of the Nixon campaign.
Gordon Liddy emerged from the office. He brushed by me and he said, Jeb just told me to take care of Jack Anderson.
He said, what's that? I said, I am to kill Jack Anderson. I am on my way to kill Jack Anderson. He said, oh my God. He took off like a deer, running down the hall.
I then went into Magruder's office and I said, Jeb, did you just tell him to rub out Jack Anderson?
He came back in and I said, Gordon, I was just talking off the cuff. I wasn't serious. And Liddy looked at me with that stern, sort of macho look, and he said, never give me an order for a hit job that you don't mean, because I'll do it.
Liddy was impatient to get on with his intelligence operation. Bypassing Magruder, he went straight to the White House to ask John Dean how big he was supposed to think.
I said, well, if you're talking about an all-out, full offensive and defensive capability political intelligence operation, you're talking about one hell of a lot of money, first of all. And he said, how about $500,000 for openers? And I said, well, you're in the ballpark there.
Liddy promptly produced $1 million plan. He needed the approval of Attorney General John Mitchell, soon to be Nixon campaign chairman. In Mitchell's office in the Justice Department, the temple of law enforcement, Liddy presented his illegal plan, codenamed Gemstone.
Gordon had with him these very expensive, well-done charts. I think there were 7 of them. Each had different code names, and each one described some type of activity that would, in a sense, harass the Democrats.
Each different kind of operation was given the name of a precious jewel, We had so many operations, we quickly ran out of precious jewels. We went into semi-precious jewels, and by the time we were finished, we were down to coal and brick.
He said, clearly one of the major problems of this campaign is going to be the problem of demonstrations. And he said, I think, General, as he told John Mitchell, we have a good solution to that. I have retained the services of some really tough men. What I can do is direct these men to kidnap campaign leaders, drug them, and take them below the Mexican border and put them out of commission.
Mr. Mitchell said, well, where do you get people like that? And I said, it's my understanding they're from organized crime. And he said, well, what is that going to cost us?
I think for Mitchell, Dean, and I, it was rather ludicrous. I mean, here we were, in a sense, sitting in the Attorney General of the United States office, and here's Gordon Liddy talking about some of the more bizarre plans.
He said, I've made some preliminary arrangements to get a Chinese motifed houseboat that I can park on one of the canals down near the convention center in Miami. And it will have two-way cameras in this Chinese motifed houseboat. And I'll use prostitutes to go out and seduce into the houseboat high campaign officials.
They were to linger about and attract the attention of mid-range Democratic staffers who would try to impress them with how important they were by saying, oh, watch tomorrow, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. We would get all of that.
And I said, Gordon, you've got to be kidding. And he really was very offended by my interruption. And taking that offense, he said, I want to assure the General these are the finest girls from Baltimore. At the end of Liddy's presentation, John Mitchell took kind of a long puff on his pipe, and a little cloud came up over his head and sort of sat there for a minute, and he said, Gordon, he said, I just don't think this is quite what we had in mind.
So I said to Gordon, I said, well, why don't you cut out all this other fluffy stuff that it really isn't what we're looking for, and concentrate on the electronic surveillance.
On the issue of bugging, Nixon's Attorney General had taken a high moral tone in public.
Mr. Mitchell, how careful will you be about invasion of privacy in the matter of surveillance and wiretap?
Well, since I believe so fully and wholeheartedly in the protection of the privacy of the individual, I will make sure that nothing is done in this area of electronic surveillance that will invade the privacy of individuals.
This same Mitchell sat down a second time to hear Liddy's revised plan to bug the Democratic headquarters. Before he could finish, John Dean spoke up.
I just said, gentlemen, I just don't think that the things that are being discussed here ought to be discussed in the office of the Attorney General of the United States.
Dean ran away, got in an elevator, and took off. He did not want me to start building him a new ass the way I did the last time. But I had Magruder, and I really ripped into Magruder, saying, you know, what's going on here?
In desperation, Liddy turned for help to Howard Hunt, his old partner in crime.
Liddy said, look, you've got this great friend and principal in the White House, Chuck Colson. He's got all kinds of influence. It's very important to me that this gemstone project go forward because it's my career. Will you introduce me to Colson?
It was about 5:30, 6 o'clock one night, typically frantic day in the White House. My secretary says, Howard Hunt is here, has a friend with him. I'd never met Gordon Liddy.
I started talking about our problem about getting a decision on the gemstone plant. Colson did not want to hear about the gemstone plant. He said, wait a minute, I don't want to hear any of this. What you need is a decision, correct? Yes. I said, fine. Picked up the phone, called Magruder.
I said, Jeb, these guys are in here. They can't get a decision. What are you guys going to do? Either give them a yes or a no. Don't leave them hanging.
What he did was clearly indicate to me he wanted, the president wanted, he always used the president, wanted to get this thing off the dime, get it going. So he wanted me to make a decision.
There was pressure from the White House, from me, and from the president to the committee to get their campaign intelligence activity going.
Nixon was most concerned about one Democrat, Larry O'Brien, often his most effective critic.
I thought this administration was a law and order administration.
O'Brien was, at that time, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, the head of the Democratic Party, and at the same time was taking into his own pocket a very, very substantial fee from Howard Hughes.
For years, billionaire Howard Hughes had been secretly financing both political parties and the Nixon campaign. Nixon was determined to find out about the O'Brien-Hughes connection and what damaging information O'Brien had on him.
I first saw it in the form of a memo that had been dictated by the President on Air Force One to Haldeman saying, isn't it about time we make Larry O'Brien accountable for his retainer with Howard Hughes?
Larry O'Brien's office in the Democratic National Committee now became the key target of the bugging operation. It was located in the huge luxury complex called the Watergate.
What Colson wanted me to do was to get off the stick, as he said, and get Liddy's project to bug Larry O'Brien's phone and so on off the ground and get it funded.
The decision on Liddy's project was made in Key Biscayne, Florida. Campaign chairman John Mitchell was on vacation there. But Magruder could wait no longer. He interrupted his boss's Easter break to get the plan approved. What happened at this meeting has always been a point of fierce controversy.
Now, did you approve the Liddy plan?
At the Key Biscayne,
Yes.
I have never approved the Liddy plan as we're discussing it at any time, and certainly I didn't approve it at Key Biscayne.
John Mitchell died in 1988, still denying he had ever approved the Gemstone plan. The surviving participants, however, tell a different story.
Well, the last item on the agenda was the Gemstone file, and the issue now was that we either had to approve it or it was going to be too late for us to do anything. So Mitchell, LaRue, and I talked about it.
I asked Jeb, I said, what the hell is this electronic surveillance business? He said, well, that's been in the mill a long time, and I'm getting a lot of pressure to get an answer on it.
The president wants it done. Haldeman seems to think it's very important. Colson's been on my back.
Mitchell read it. He looked at me and said, have you read this? I said, yes. He said, what do you think of it? I said, John, it's not worth the risk.
To me, it was a throwaway project. You know, give Liddy the $250,000 and let's get him off our back and satisfy the White House. And Mitchell finally said, okay, let's go with it, and signed off on the paper. Actually put his initials, as he always did, on the approval box to go ahead with the project.
I've reflected on this many times, and at the Key Biscayne meeting, or even after that, had I gone to Mitchell and said, John, this is crazy. I mean, this is a harebrained scheme. It's not going to do a damn thing but get us in trouble. Let's put a stop to it. If you have to, go to the White House and back them off the damn thing. Had I done that, and done it forcefully, John would have listened to me. And he would have done that, and this whole mess could have been avoided. It's one of the real regrets I have about Watergate.
It began as a third-rate burglary.
While we would pull what is called a black bag job, a surreptitious entry.
It would end with the downfall of a presidency.
And then you destroy yourself.
Watergate. This in-depth home video set contains rare interviews, recently uncovered documents, and lets you hear the player's story in their own words. To order this fascinating 5-hour video for $49.95, call 1-800-652-2400.
I want to tell you about my home far away. My mother and father are there.
Strengthening the links of communications requires capital. In the last 3 years, Merrill Lynch raised over $50 billion for communications companies around the globe. We connect investors to opportunities and the people of the world to each other. For them, it makes a difference. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
Hi, I'm Erica Seelinger with MCI. You know, 12 years ago, the cost of an average long-distance call was over $5. Today, that call is only $2.70. Now, what could have caused those rates to drop?
MCI. We helped open telecommunications to free enterprise and helped America save billions of dollars.
And now we're introducing our greatest savings program ever.
Join and save 40% to every MCI customer you choose.
Give us a call and start saving 40% today.
Here's an inside look at Ford Motor Company's latest achievement. Our worldwide team has created a car for the world
with safety features years ahead of today's safety standards. A computerized transmission that adjusts to any driving condition, and a Duratec V6 engine that can go 100,000 miles without a tune-up. World-class features in a more affordable class of car, and soon you can drive one yourself. Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique, coming September.
In a single year, 93% of our toxic chemical waste was treated, converted to energy, or recycled. What about the other 7%? We're working on it. The 180 members and partners of the Chemical Manufacturers Association, working for change.
What's hidden below the surface? What secrets are to be revealed? Tuesdays, a legendary journey, a river of graves. Fact meets fiction on Terra X. Then, for treasure, science, or pleasure, why do they do it? Explore undersea worlds. Tuesdays, beginning at 9 Mountain, 8 Pacific, on the Discovery Channel.
Here's Larry.
Through every stage of life, your United Way gift makes a difference in our community. It gives a child like Casey a chance to grow healthy and strong. It helps a teenager like Myron get an education and a future. It offers someone like Mary love and comfort in her later years. From all of us at Comcast, thank you for supporting our United Way.
Thank you!
Be the difference. See the difference. United Way.
Enjoying the entertainment value of Viewer's Choice is as easy as 1, 2, free. That's right, 1, 2, free. During August, when you order 2 pay-per-view movies, you'll get a 3rd movie free. And if you've never ordered pay-per-view before, your first movie is only 99 cents. Just watch your mail for a Viewer's Choice 99-cent coupon and check your cable guide or newspaper for a buy 2, get 1 free coupon. Then sit back and enjoy the blockbuster hits of Comcast and Viewer's Choice. It's as easy as 1, 2, free.
The president's campaign chairman had finally allowed Liddy's plan to go forward. But did the White House know? We have uncovered the only existing written evidence of the authorization of the Watergate project. For 20 years, it was thought that all copies of this memorandum had been deliberately destroyed by the aide who wrote it for Haldeman.
This is a truly amazing document to surface at this late date. And what the document says is that Gordon Liddy's intelligence operation proposal, $300,000, has been approved, right there in big black and white letters. If Haldeman knew about this, there is no doubt in my mind that Richard Nixon knew about this, because everything that Haldeman knew, he knew for the sake of Richard Nixon. And it's just inconceivable to me that this type of information, which Nixon loved, would not be shared with him.
We knew that Gordon Liddy had been set in as this campaign counsel, but with the responsibility for intelligence. And apparently he had a budget approved and was going to start moving on doing whatever he was going to do.
I was called in by Jeb Stuart Magruder to his office, and he said, "Can you get into the Watergate office building? We want you to wiretap Larry O'Brien's telephone and put in a room monitoring device so that conversations in there can be held. Anything that's available, we want it photographed."
To photograph the documents, Liddy rehired the Cubans who would handle the Ellsberg job. If anything went wrong, their White House connection could not be traced. But the man he chose to bug the phones mainlined right back to the Nixon organization.
I took the decision, a dangerous gamble and risk, something I had told people I wouldn't do, and I recruited Mr. James McCord, who was the security chief of the committee to re-elect the president.
The president himself was 5,000 miles away in Moscow. He crowned a year of foreign policy triumphs by signing the first nuclear arms limitation agreement with the Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. On Sunday, May 28th, he concluded his trip with a televised speech to the Russian people.
Спасибо и до свидания.
That very night, the security chief of his re-election committee, with his Cuban colleagues, broke into the Watergate.
Once we got in, we found that Larry O'Brien's door was locked to his office. It adjoined the reception area there. And so there'd been so much time gone by, and there'd been, frankly, so much noise made in gaining entry that we just didn't really want to proceed to jimmy or break another lock.
Instead, McCord placed a bug on the secretary's switchboard and a second phone nearby, while the Cubans got to work on the documents. They set up a listening post in the Howard Johnson motel opposite, but the bugs produced only trivia.
I was distressed by them. They had nothing of value. I'm getting hairdressing appointments and things like that.
I talked to Mitchell, and I showed Mitchell what was the first fruits of Liddy's endeavor, and he looked through it rather quickly and agreed with me that these were worthless.
What they wanted was specifically, well, what's Larry O'Brien up to, and what's he doing, and what's he saying? We were going to have to go back in again and put in more devices and make sure that we got what they were looking for.
Mr. Magruder said, listen, Gordon, this is what I want. I want what Larry O'Brien has right here. And he struck his bottom desk drawer, which is where we kept what we had on the Democrats.
Well, I was telling Liddy, look, I want the real stuff, the information that's important, not this stuff that you've gotten for us. It has no meaning whatsoever to the campaign.
And he was, I want everything photographed. And I said to myself, my Lord, what was supposed to be now a quick 5-minute in-and-out repair mission is a multi-hour photo recon mission.
When they asked us to go for the second operation, they told me to get up, I don't know, 50 roll of film. So I multiplied 50 for 36, and I said, Jesus Christ, these people want a lot of pictures, you know.
Entry night was to be Friday night, June 16th. In anticipation of which the Miami team arrived in Washington that afternoon.
The Cubans rendezvoused with their bosses, Hunt and Liddy, in the Watergate Hotel. Jim McCord and his assistant were across the street in the Howard Johnson, waiting until the coast was clear.
There was a man working in the back very, very late. I mean, he stayed and he stayed and he stayed. It's a Friday night. I mean, this was some dedicated Democrat. We thought he'd never go home. Finally, about 1:45, the word came from across the way at the lookout.
Jim said to whoever he was talking to on the phone, I think we can make a go. And with that, he said, Al, you're going to remain here. And he walked over to the bed and he took a walkie-talkie. He said, I want you to use this.
It was decided by Hunt and Liddy that McCord, who had access to the building, would go into the Watergate building and go down there and open the thing from the inside and put in tapes in the door.
McCord collected his men and tried to go back in.
We came to the back door and tried the handle, and the door was latched. Someone obviously had removed the tape, taken it off in that brief period of time.
Had the police been alerted? McCord's bosses had to make a snap judgment.
I said, let's scratch this. And Liddy said, no, this is McCord's show. He's got to go through with it. And it's his fault that we're here. And besides, it's very important to my career that we do this.
You know, I felt like refusing, saying, no, this is far enough. You go. But then I figured, you know, I was older, getting older. I wasn't a young kid anymore. And my personal feeling was these people don't think I'm scared, you know.
McCord put the telltale tape back on the doors, and this time the team made it into Democratic headquarters.
We were in contact by transceiver with our men inside the Watergate and also with the lookout, Mr. Baldwin, across the street.
Now the reception area to the Democratic headquarters lights up, the actual reception room, which I can see directly across from where I'm standing. And I note 3 individuals come into the reception area.
3 plainclothes policemen discovered the break-in team crouched under desks and ordered them to come out with their hands up.
Out comes a fellow, a middle-aged man, one of the Miami men dressed in a suit.
They were more nervous than we were when they found us there. I mean, we were dressed up, and we were not the common burglar.
Here comes a second man out from behind the second desk, and he's dressed in a suit. And he doesn't look like a burglar either.
They come in waving guns and so forth. This is the police. What are you guys doing here?
They were wired. They were hyper. They just, it didn't all add up. It didn't compute with them what was going on and who they had, except they knew we didn't belong there.
The break-in was over. But for President Richard Nixon, Watergate had barely begun.
Want to know more about the corruption of American politics and the fall of Richard Nixon? Watergate is also a book by Fred Emery, who covered the scandal as it happened. Ask for Watergate at bookstores now.
Up next, Watergate continues on the Discovery Channel.